Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar. I'm excited to see so many people here. And yeah, we're excited that you showed up. My name's Emily, and thanks for coming to today's webinar. You're going to learn how to understand call blocking and labeling, and then 3 things that you can do about it. So very briefly, I'm just going to introduce myself and Arbite. We are a communication solution provider located in Buffalo, New York, and in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. We provide powerful and easy-to-use contact solutions that empower businesses to have more pleasant conversations with consumers. And my name's Emily. I'm the content creator at Arbite, and I'm very excited to introduce today's guest. Today we have Molly Weis of Numeracle. She's the Director of Marketing and Communications at Numeracle, and Numeracle enables organizations who rely on the voice channel to engage with their clients, members, and patients to improve calling reputation, prevent improper scam and fraud labeling, and improve customer engagement. And Molly's going to be walking us through what the call labeling and blocking landscape looks like right now, why your calls might be labeled improperly, what different carriers are labeling your calls as, and then finally, 3 things that you can start to do to help improve your call labeling. And as promised, we will be giving a free health check to the first 10 numbers that we see in the chat, but please hold off on sharing your numbers in the chat until you are prompted by Molly, and I promise that it'll be very obvious. And yeah, so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Molly. Molly, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Emily. Really happy to join you guys. And hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're going to share lots of good stuff, like Emily said. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right in here to the content. So what we're going to start with is an exploration of what's going on across the wireless carrier ecosystem when it comes to call blocking and labeling. So you'll see here a couple of examples of what this looks like. If you've seen or you've heard from your consumers that your calls are coming across labeled as things like scam or potential spam, it's because each of the big 4 wireless carriers is working with a third-party call blocking and labeling analytics provider right now to associate a reputational score or risk rating to each of your phone numbers. These scores or risk ratings are determined by these call labeling analytics and then provided out to the wireless carriers who are going to apply that actual labeling terminology that you will see associated with your call when it's delivered to one of the wireless subscribers you're calling. Some phones come preloaded with your carrier's call blocking and labeling apps. Many subscribers are automatically just opted in at this point. And in some cases, you as a subscriber don't even realize call blocking is happening on your device. It's all pretty seamless now. And on the flip side of that, you as being the call originator definitely do not know if your outbound call was just blocked or labeled. There's no kind of feedback loop. You don't get a notification back saying, hey, this call you just tried to place, we just labeled it as scam. You don't get that. So it makes it pretty difficult to be able to know exactly what is going on. So we're hoping to shed a little bit of light on that today. So when we're talking about phone number reputation and what that means, there are a lot of different factors that lead to a call being improperly blocked or labeled. This can be a mix of internal and external factors. The analytics can be subjective in the way they're assessing your calls, but generally speaking, they're looking at call volume, consistency of your calling, general time of day that you're calling most heavily, how you're reaching out to the same customer in a period of time, how many times those dialing attempts are made. If consumers end up complaining about your phone numbers or using that report spam button from inside the apps they're using. And it also, some of them also look at the way you represent your business name in a caller ID name where that's available. And also, in some cases, how you are identifying yourself in the voicemails you leave. All of this can roll up together and come into play when we're talking about how the analytics are driving these decision-making tactics around how they're going to label your call across the wireless ecosystem. And Kind of one notch above labeling is actual call blocking. So the FCC at this point has given the carriers all the ability to block calls by default based on a call being classified as a scam or a fraud based on the particular carrier's third-party analytics partner. If a call is classified as a fraud, it can be blocked at the network level, or in some cases sent straight to voicemail. Depends on the carrier. Again, you as the caller do not receive a notification that this happened. But some indications that your outbound calls might be being blocked would be the equivalent of a disconnect signal or a busy signal, or in some cases a message, something to the effect of this call cannot be completed as dialed. Sometimes that means the subscriber you're calling actually has disconnected the number, but a lot of times in today's world, it means that you might be having your calls blocked at the network level due to that scam or fraud classification. So kind of the natural next question is, if you're blocked somewhere by some carrier, does that mean you're going to be blocked everywhere? And the good news is that no. There are a lot of inconsistencies when we're talking about differences from carrier to carrier, but in most cases, if you're blocked by one carrier, that doesn't mean that you're going to be blocked everywhere. The same goes for labeling activities, those call labeling events that we're going to talk about carrier to carrier in a second here. A lot of inconsistencies. These analytics sources aren't really sharing analytics data with each other, so you're not always going to be blocked everywhere. So it's usually about trying to figure out where you have issues and looking into pinpointing that. There's even differences with labeling activity carrier to carrier within the carrier based on whether or not you as a subscriber are on a free, just the basic subscription from your carrier, or if you have opted into the enhanced or the paid call blocking and labeling services that the carriers provide. If you do opt into one of those enhanced packages from your carrier, you get additional options to be able to block and label calls. So what we're going to do now is go through carrier by carrier and discuss some of these differences to try to really hone in on what you'll see being different across those carriers and even within the same carrier. So we're going to start here with T-Mobile and talking about what's looking different here. Two columns here we've got over on the right-hand side of the screen. Let's start with the free subscription. What do you get if you're on T-Mobile just by default? T-Mobile is going to block by default any of the calls that their analytics partner has identified to them as being in that scam likely category. That's the equivalent of the scam, the fraud, the illegal call. You can opt out of this, and if you do opt out of the default level blocking as the subscriber on the network, you can then see labels coming through as scam likely, but if you don't opt out of it, those are just going to be blocked by default. And that's about it that you get on the basic subscription with T-Mobile. Now, if you opt into their paid platform, which is called Name ID, you get some additional labels coming through, like the nuisance likely. That's the equivalent of the spam call. So not the illegal call, but it's spam. They also will show you where they've got the information available, some kind of intent-based labeling. So in addition to the number, you might also see a little word below it that says survey, or charity, or telemarketing. That's another additional label that you might see from T-Mobile when you're in that paid platform that for the subscriber might help you figure out who's calling you and if you want to answer it or not. And on that paid platform, you'll also get caller ID name. And this is a big topic that comes up for us a lot. When are people going to see my name, my business name coming through or not? So, and this is consistent across all the carriers. If you're on that basic subscription, you're not going to see a caller ID name. But if you opt into the paid subscription, that's where the carrier will provide that name out to you where they do have it. So that's T-Mobile in a nutshell. Let's move on here to AT&T. So they give their subscribers a lot more options when it comes to call blocking and labeling. AT&T is blocking the fraud risk level calls by default. That's that equivalent of the scam fraud. It's all kind of the same thing. They're going to block that by default. They will pass through other calls that are kind of one step down from fraud, which is the spam category. So you'll be able to see calls coming through as a spam risk. They also, even in the paid platform, AT&T will pass through this kind of intent-based, like telemarketer, political, survey. They'll pass that through where they have that description from their analytics provider. They'll show that with an incoming call as well. where they have it. It doesn't always come through, but it can. And the big difference here from the free platform on AT&T versus the enhanced Call Protect Plus that they offer is really just that caller ID name is one of the big differences. If you've got the subscriber paid features, you'll be able to see that caller ID name. If you're just a basic AT&T subscriber, you're not going to see a caller ID name coming through. So AT&T is kind of the most aggressive, if you haven't noticed that. The additional categories and all the additional things they show through is kind of the most intense that you'll see across the various wireless carriers. So onto Verizon, you'll see it's scaled back a little bit here. Verizon is blocking by default that potential fraud level call, scammer fraud, so that's consistent with what the other carriers are doing. Verizon also does have a spam label. They call it potential spam that will ring through. If you've got the paid subscription, you've got the additional flexibility to block different types and levels of calls. You can really kind of set that up based on your individual preferences of what you want to ring through or not. When your call is blocked, Verizon's going to give you back as the caller a message, something to the effect of your call can't be completed as dialed. So they have published that. So if that's something you're hearing, Verizon has stated that that's what they're sending out when they block a call. And again, with the caller ID name, folks on the basic Verizon subscription cell service aren't going to see caller ID names, but if you're in that paid Call Filter Plus area, you will have the ability to see a name show up with incoming calls. Last but not least is the Sprint network, and you'll see that that looks very similar to Verizon. That is because currently Verizon and Sprint are both sharing the same analytics source in the back end. That might change based on Sprint just going through their merger with T-Mobile. So you might see this change up in the future. But for now, they're doing things very similarly here as Verizon would, where high-risk calls are being blocked. That's that like scam and fraud category again. They're showing a spam caller label come through. On the paid subscription, you have a couple additional functions where you can block calls, set up a personal block list and things like that. And again, you'll get caller ID names if you have Call Screener Plus, but not on a basic Sprint cell service. So now that we've gone through all these differences kind of carrier to carrier to kind of hone in on some of the terminology that you see to where if you have your clients you're working with and they do answer the phone and they say, hey, when you just called me, it said spam caller. Do you know why? You know, this can help you kind of hone in on, oh, spam caller? Okay, yeah, that's Sprint. I guess we're having a problem with Sprint. And this is kind of the decision tree that we'll walk through with our clients to help try to figure out where are you having issues, where does it seem like everything's okay, and what can we recommend to you based on these specific things we're seeing, strategies to improve this. So now is the fun part you've been waiting for that Emily mentioned. We're going to do something interactive here. So if you would like to share one of your business phone numbers in our chat window, we're going to be collecting those. And the first 10 phone numbers we see show up in this chat window, we're going to do a little dip and take a little sneak peek of what that phone number looks like across some of our analytics and app partners. And we will respond back to you via email after this webinar with some data that kind of shows you a preliminary view of what your phone number looks like across some sources that we can share with you. So feel free to do that. We'll be collecting those in the chat window through the end of the webinar. And for now, I'm going to continue on and talk about some strategies that you might want to employ to help kind of stop the cycle here of perpetual call labeling. Some things, we'll share some recommendations that we've provided to clients in the past, some things that could help you kind of get out of some of this call labeling that continues to impact your ability to connect with your subscribers and your consumers. So the first recommendation that we would give would be to think about call volume. We don't know exactly how much volume is too much, but if you're calling a significant amount of consumers a day, kind of rule of thumb here is the more aggressively you're dialing, the more your dialing could be perceived as a potential spam or a scam attack by one of the analytics providers. This might cause them to flag your call as a potential spam, which in turn makes it more likely that consumers might complain about that phone number or report the call as a spam through the apps they're using. The other suggestion we think about is try to think about how often you're trying to reach certain consumers within a period of time. whether you already have a relationship with them or if this is the first time you're ever reaching out to them. Kind of basic rule of thumb here is that when somebody gives you consent to call them, they probably don't intend for you to call them, 10 times a day. Just kind of a crazy example here of what not to do, but this type of activity is being tracked and monitored by the analytics. So aggressive dialing and frequent dialing attempts within a small amount of time, those are kind of two major factors that can lead to improper call blocking, as things like spam, or in some cases even scam, if enough consumers are reporting that call as being something that seems kind of fraudulent. Recommendation number 2 is to think about your phone numbers and the purposes that you're using these phone numbers for. So using one number to make a variety of different types of phone calls can sometimes come off as confusing and inconsistent across the call labeling ecosystem. The analytics like consistency. If things look kind of spiky or all over the place, it can start to raise some flags. So we suggest here just thinking about the ways you're assigning specific sets of phone numbers or individual phone numbers that you have in play for your organization. Think about using, let's just say, one set for recurring calls with clients who already know and trust you versus different phone numbers that you would use for consumers you've never talked to before, might not be expecting your call and they might not know who you are. Trying to segregate this activity can help really hone in on where you're having problems. It's less likely the people that already know you, that you have that ongoing dialogue with, are going to report your calls as spam. Whereas when you're reaching out to people for the first time who don't know who you are, they're more likely to report the calls as being spam just because they're not sure exactly what it is or who you are. This is also particularly relevant when you think about phone number usage to organizations who are doing a mix of third-party and first-party calling. For those who are doing first-party calling, it's very important to identify specific phone numbers for each first-party client you're calling on behalf of, and not sharing a common bank of phone numbers across multiple clients. The analytics don't like that. If they see these numbers coming through and sometimes you're calling as St. Joe's Hospital and then tomorrow it's something else, it looks like maybe somebody's stealing your number. They're not really sure what's going on. They're not sure who you are. So really kind of focusing on specific numbers for specific purposes can help. So that's our recommendation number 2. And then number 3, last recommendation here is to try to stay consistent with the presentation of your brand, with your calling brand and your calling identity wherever you can. Sometimes negative labeling can originate by confusion around who you are, again, and why you're calling. And this can tie back to the way your name is associated with your phone number, inclusive of any caller ID information that is available, whether it's displayed or not, across the wireless cell carriers. This name, as it's associated with your number, is cross-referenced with who crowdsourced users say you were when you called them. Basically, that feedback loop when they report back and say, I got this call, and this is who I think it was. If that's not matching the way your number is in their databases, who they think you're going to be, if consumers are saying it's somebody else, that can get really confusing. Some analytics even go so far as to review the voicemails you're leaving. So if you say you're somebody a little bit different than what shows up on your caller ID name, the two don't seem to match with each other, that can again cause to some uncertainty around who you are and why you're calling, and can lead to further negative impacts to the reputation around your phone numbers. So with that third recommendation, now we are going to turn it on over to the Q&A portion. So Emily, if you've got some questions that have come in, we could start to tackle some of those now.
Thanks, Molly. I do have one question here. The question is there any data on how many consumers are using paid plans versus the free basic plans for the carriers?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. We don't have any hard facts around this. It does fluctuate, but the adoption rate is relatively low. So it's going to be less than half of the people that are out there by far. Most of the subscribers are just relying on that default base package. So when you're thinking about the labels that people might be seeing, it's typically whatever was given for free by the carrier on that basic subscription level.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
That is the only question that came in, but just for all the attendees that are here, we only got 2 phone numbers. So if you did not submit your phone number yet and you wanted that free health check, feel free to submit it before we close out, just so that you can get that free information on your phone numbers and make sure that your numbers aren't being labeled or mislabeled rather. But yeah, I just wanted to include here Numerical's website and then our website if you wanted any more information. And then finally, an email address, sales@arbitesoftware.com. If you have any questions about how you can use Numerical as an Arbite client, or if you are not a client and you just wanted more information about Numerical or call labeling in general, feel free to use that email for any questions that you have, and we will get you an answer as soon as possible. But yeah, that's all we have for today. So thank you so much, Molly, for being here. We really appreciate your time and expertise on this topic.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Emily, and the Arbite family.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, feel free to reach out with any questions. If you did submit a phone number, we will be reaching out within the next couple of days with that free health check. And then we will also be sending a recording to anyone who attended so you can review this information at any time. So yes, thanks everyone again, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.